That time, a movie with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd changed financial law in the United States. Trading Places, released in 1983 and starring Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. The movie follows the story of two main characters, Billy Ray Valentine, played by Eddie Murphy, who's portrayed as a bit of a down-on-his-luck scam artist, who repeatedly talks his way into and out of trouble. And Lewis Winthorpe III, played by Dan Aykroyd, who plays this character as quite the effete snob born into money and is employed by Duke and Duke Trading Company. And it's made very clear early on in the film that he lives a life of luxury. The antagonists of the film, played by Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici, are the Duke brothers, who bet $1 that they can take Eddie Murphy's character, who they describe as a useless psychopath, and Dan Aykroyd's character, and actually make them trade places. They do this by ruining Lewis Winthorpe III and simply installing Billy Ray Valentine in Lewis's life.
This is my stuff.
Your own personal property?
Yeah, my own personal shit.
Eddie Murphy's character learns of the plot and brings Lewis back into his life and tries to explain to him,
It was the Dukes. It was the Dukes.
You're a dead man, Valentine!
which he ultimately does. Now, the main theme inside this entire film is stock trading. And more importantly, it revolves around insider information, mainly a crop report about frozen orange juice. The Duke brothers paid a man to get a hold of a crop report before stock trading could commence, giving them insider information and allowing them to corner the market on frozen orange juice. Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy's character learn of this, intercept that crop report, and provide the Dukes with a false crop report, setting up the Duke brothers to invest incorrectly and forcing the Duke brothers into poverty, and getting the sweetest of revenge. I'll explain how they did that in another video because it's quite the complicated process. But the point is that they used insider information to be able to gain an advantage in stock trading, which at the time the movie was made was not actually illegal. In the end, our main character's plan works, they get rich, and the Duke brothers get poor. But how did this movie actually affect the law? Well, in 2009, H.R. 4173, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, was passed into law by then-President Barack Obama. Under Section 746 of the Dodd-Frank ruling, it states that it is illegal to use non-public information, such as reports from the Department of Agriculture, to conduct consumer trading. That rule was actually added to the Dodd-Frank law, directly inspired by the film Trading Places, and it is known as the Eddie Murphy Rule. And that is how a 1983 comedy directed by John Landis and starring Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd directly affected the law in the United States. On a side note, the antagonists from Trading Places would show their faces again in the 1988 film Coming to America, where the main character, played by Eddie Murphy, would hand off money to apparently two unhomed individuals. Those two unhomed individuals would end up being Randolph and Mortimer Duke. Though this scene did inspire some rumors that there would be a sequel to Trading Places that would see the Duke brothers rise back to their place of power, this was merely just a cameo. But it was ultimately a very fun scene in the 1988 film Coming to America.
Mortimer, we're back.
Props to history.